morning, everyone. I'll just give it another minute till we have everybody in. You're very welcome. Brilliant. Okay, good morning. How are you?
Good morning.
Thank you so much for joining us today for the launch of the 2022 edition of The Adult Learner. We really appreciate you taking the time to join us, and I hope that you'll find this event a valuable start to your week. My name is Derva Lawless, and I'm the CEO of AONTAS, the National Adult Learning Organisation, and together with the Adult Education Association, we produce the Adult Learner Journal. The Adult Education Officers Association, excuse me. But I'll come back to this in a moment. First of all, I should go through some of the housekeeping. This event is being recorded and our GDPR notice is in your chat box now. Please keep your microphone muted during the event to protect the sound quality for others listening in. You can use the closed captions to get a live script throughout the session by clicking the closed caption button at the bottom of your Zoom window, and you'll see a list of options. On that option, you can click live transcript, and hopefully that should work. But if you have any tech issues at all or need support, please pop a message into the chat box or a private message to one of my colleagues in AONTAS, and they'll be very glad to help. Okay, back to the event. As I said, today we're launching the 2022 edition of The Adult Learner. You can now find this online or on the AONTAS website. The theme is measuring success in adult, community and further education. Shortly, I will give you a brief overview of the contributions in the journal, and this will be followed by the wonderful adult learner and advocate Noel Hanrahan, and he'll talk to us about his measures of success during his adult learning journey. We will then have a keynote address from Arjen Wals, who is the Professor of Transformative Learning for Socio-Ecological Sustainability at Wageningen University in the Netherlands. And then at around 10:35, our editor, Dr. Rosemary Moreland, will provide an overview of the discussion groups. We'll have a short presentations on each of these from the writers and contributors, and that means you'll get a really nice taste of all the wonderful academic research and adult learning practice inside this 2022 edition. We'll then have a comfort break at about 11:30, and that'll be followed by those discussion groups. We'll come back together for a recap and some closing remarks. And I promise that you'll be feeling inspired today. Your creative juices will be flowing and your brain will feel a little bit nourished. I want to give special thanks to our editor, Rosemary Moreland, and the editorial board, Jane O'Kelly, Luke Murta, Helen Murphy, Maria Slowey, David Mallows, Nuala Glanton, Barbara Fleming, Fran Kennedy, Stephen O'Brien, Jose Pedro Amorman, Deirdre Linsky, and Cohen DePrick, who have dedicated a huge amount of time to the journal. Thank you. They've ensured it stays true to its purpose, providing a space for adult and community education practitioners and academics to share their insights, experience, and their amazing research, which strengthens our sector and enriches our work. And we hope that it is an accessible journal, and engaging with it is an empowering and rich learning experience for everybody involved. I'd also like to congratulate Juliana Penny on the AONTAS team, who has put so much care and work into this edition and brought it to life. Thank you, Juliana. And a sincere thank you to Caris Hughes, our head of communications, for all of her work as well. This edition of the journal includes 2 forewords and then 7 articles from the perspectives of community and lifelong learning, and 3 book reviews. We have a guest forward from Liz McSkeen, Nuala Glanton and Cecilia Rafferty, which pays respect to the wonderful Liz O'Sullivan, who we sadly lost in 2021. Liz was a passionate adult educator who thought with a social justice approach. She dedicated so much of her time to the sector and made a vast contribution, including on the editorial board of this journal. We also have a reflective piece from the former chair of the editorial board and former CEO of AONTAS, Niamh O'Reilly. Niamh shares her insights from over 17 years working in AONTAS, during which time she set up the Community Education Network in 2007 and ensured the needs of disadvantaged learners remained in the agenda during the pandemic. The relevance of this year's theme on measuring success is timely. We are dealing with the cost of living crisis and potentially an economic downturn. And as we know, in times of hardship, Irish governments in the past have stripped back funding for non-formal education and community education, damaging the true spirit of our sector and the wider benefits of adult learning. And they've directed their attention on upskilling and employment. Instead of a vehicle for social change, it was used as a mechanism for decreasing numbers on the social welfare. However, as educators and learners, we will be informed by our history and grow from it. This edition of the journal provides a space for authors to consider diverse methods for measuring the impact and benefits of adult learning, moving beyond economic success to the flourishing of learning potential and transformation. It highlights the importance of learner identity and captures learner voice and the power of the adult education practitioner and their dedication to promoting and fighting for equality and social inclusion. This edition challenges racism, discrimination, and marginalization, while acknowledging the fundamental need for adult learning in our society. This sector acts as a collective, and it is a compassionate, powerful, and thoughtful force that continues to stand strong. This edition, thanks to all of our amazing authors, reminds us that we must be relentless in our drive for an equitable adult learning system. And how better to stay true to our shared values in the sector than to hear from the most courageous adult learning representative, Noel Hanrahan. Noel, I'll pass over to you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Noel Hanrahan, and I'm a learner at LCETB O'Connell Avenue campus, Limerick. My first courses 3.5 years ago were a confidence course and a personal effectiveness course. These courses were building blocks for what has become a transformative journey for me in adult education. A year ago, I started a recovery and mental health class where I was able to honestly explore my own mental health for the first time. Having the word recovery in the course title was a real inspiration. I remember seeing Maslow's hierarchy of needs for the first time, and when I put myself in this pyramid, I saw more clearly than before many of the areas of my life that I needed to learn to focus on. I decided to move house for my emotional and financial freedom. I continued my counselling and my education. I have plans to be a full-time mature student in September 23, studying in the social science area. I'm taking steps to not be fully dependent on social welfare payments. I've been encouraged to think of relationships again, including romance, and have started dating again. I suffered abuse in primary school and have only started to talk about this relatively recently. This continues to be hugely necessary and rewarding work, as firstly, I realize how much good work I've done on myself over the last 3.5 years. And secondly, I will not be a victim of past traumas or more recent traumas. About 2 years ago, my house was broken into and I was assaulted, which was a nasty and triggering experience. So when thinking of what success means to me now, it is quite different to what I may have answered in the past. I determine my success by how I cope. Taking joy in coping and what that means to me is a wonderful new string to my bow. I bring my newly found confidence with me, and the reality that I'm talking about success this morning here is a subject up to a few years ago I would simply have thought did not apply to me. It reaffirms to me that change is possible, necessary, and helps me heal and grow. Through psychotherapy, I've learned and continue to learn the strength I have to heal myself by practicing cognitive behavioral therapy and mindfulness. Learning is for life, and I started in adult education to try and find some happiness. I found that and so much more. The joy of beginning to live an authentic life. And it wouldn't be authentic of me if I didn't mention the word love. For me, these positive personal choices are rooted in learning to love myself and practice self-care for myself, not rooted in anger at others. Thank you for listening and have a peaceful day.
Thank you so much, Noel. You're such an inspiration. What an honest, vulnerable, and genuine account. And I really like your piece there about talking about the joy of beginning to live an authentic life. It's amazing. You're so brave and courageous. We'll open the floor to questions just for a moment to see if anybody has any comments or questions. If you want, you could put up your hand or maybe unmute yourself. Now, they might be a bit like me, Noel. I'd be shy to be doing that as well. in front of everybody. We have a message in the chat though from Lillian and Tom. We've a few there. That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Noel, for that very powerful speech, very emotive. And then thank you, courageous and inspiring. So that's brilliant.
Thank you.
A most inspiring and powerful speech. We've loads of messages there. That's fantastic. So thank you so much, Noel. Is there anything else that you wanted to add?
Just that it's, I spoke a lot there about myself and my journey and kept on point, as they say. But when I met all yourselves and all my new friends in AONTAS, for me, it was a very powerful thing because it felt like family, you know, and it was genuine. And I had the same feeling with my counselors and tutors in adult education as well. So there's so much there, you know, all the small things become big things. But it's a really nice feeling for me to feel that for the first time in my life, I fit in, you know, and that's obviously a big deal. So thank you to everyone. Thank you.
It's so important. Thank you so much, Noel. As everybody in the chat has said, you're a huge inspiration, a real learner and role model for everybody in the community. And I think so often people who maybe are removed from working on the ground or taking the time to sit down and talk to learners don't realize the life journey that people go through to engage in adult learning and the absolute power that it has on providing that transformative impact. And you are completely a hero in that sense and an inspiration to everybody. So thank you so much. Really appreciate you taking the time to do that. And Noel will be in our group in one of the group discussions later, so you can ask him more questions then. Thank you so much, Noel. Brilliant. Okay, thank you so much, everyone. I will now introduce Professor Arjen Wals. Arjen Wals is a professor of transformative learning for socio-ecological sustainability at Wageningen University. I hope I've pronounced that correct, Arjen. He also holds the UNESCO Chair of Social Learning and Sustainable Development. His recent work focuses on transformative social learning in vital coalitions of multiple stakeholders at the interface of science and society. His teaching and research focus on designing learning processes and learning spaces that enable people to contribute meaningfully to sustainability. And I saw Arjen speak a while ago and was completely blown away. He's fantastic. So thank you so much for joining us, Arjen. I'll pass over to you.
Thank you so much. And it's really an honor to be part of this launch of this important journal. Also tough following up on Noel's inspirational personal story, really. But it made me think about what I was going to say as he was talking. So bear with me. I hopefully will stay within the 10 minutes, but no slides as a backdrop. Just trying to make a few points that hopefully will resonate or provoke. I think my background is in environmental, ecological, sustainability oriented education, and it has been for a few decades. And over time, I've moved towards transformative and transgressive forms of learning. And let me try to describe what I mean by that. I think we need to be speaking about adult learning and what it means in the Anthropocene or in the Capitolocene, the epoch or the era in which we live, where one single species seems to be capable of destroying a planet that has been formed over billions of years in less than 200-300 years. That's quite remarkable that one single species can do that. But also, of course, very worrisome. Some people say we are living on a dying planet. I'm not there yet. But I do think that we need to really reflect on what does our education, teaching and learning amplify, accelerate in this world, and what is it maybe ignoring or silencing. So I think we need to reflect on the normativity, the direction, the moral compass that guides all learning, including adult learning. And we need to also, we talk about measuring success, we need to reimagine and maybe reframe what success means. I think a lot of education is looking at helping the economy grow and even helping personal growth, as it has become in a way a commodity these days. where it's all about being flexible workers who can be consumers 24 hours, 7 days a week. And in some ways, we are constantly being tempted to participate in activities that are fundamentally unsustainable from a social, ecological, and even economic point of view. So the normativity of what we do needs to be made explicit. What are we strengthening? What are we maybe weakening or silencing? I think it's really important, and Noel talked about happiness, and I think, with the pursuit of happiness within planetary boundaries, in an equitable way, so that our happiness is not at the expense of the happiness of others or the happiness of future generations, is really important. Recently, I blogged on transformativelearning.nl on just to be provocative about innovation instead of innovation. And innovation has to do, I think, with slowing down, also paying attention to just being, maybe even, if we look at the four seasons, there's spring and there's summer, which tends to be the seasons that we focus on in our economy: growth, expansion, innovation. But the other seasons of fall and winter, where there's slowing down, hibernation, regeneration, revitalization, those are very important qualities and aspects of life that we tend to ignore. We should be able to just be happy also where we are, who we are, with what we have. But that's not a kind of value that is helping the economy grow. And there are lots of forces that pushes in that direction. So Gert Biesta, a Dutch colleague of mine, an education philosopher, talks about subjectification as one of the three important qualities of education, where we need to, it's basically learning for being and becoming, and also the deeper learning within ourselves and how we relate to the wider world. It's often ignored at the expense of focusing on qualification and socialization in terms of, as I said, preparing for the expansive economy, and individualism and competition and things like that are being socialized, but not solidarity and community very much. And so we need a major shift in education and learning. It's more relational, more holistic, where we think and maybe more place-based, grounded in community, but also grounded in the localities of where we live, and developing connections with places and people. If we don't have those connections, then who will care for those relations? So an ethic of care and a pedagogy of care is needed. At the same time, we also need some kind of pedagogy of resistance, where we build disruptive capacity against these normalized forces of exclusion, polarization, extraction, exploitation, marginalization, and indeed ecological destruction. So I think when we shift our attention to these more critical relational approaches, we also need to rethink measurement. And maybe move from measurement to, you might call it engagement, where we spell gauge as gauging, sensing. Not famously, I think it was Abraham Maslow, who said, not everything that counts can be measured, and not everything that can be measured counts. And I think this is a very wise statement. If we talk about social, ecological justice, if we talk about love, if we talk about empathy, if we talk about solidarity, then these are things that are so important but not easily measured. And maybe trying to measure them and coming up with indicators might actually kill the very essence of these aspects. So it's maybe more about sensing and looking for signs of empathy, compassion, agency, commitment, joint commitment, purpose, love. What are signs, and do we create spaces that invite for those things to emerge, and focusing more on the spaces. Are they conducive to these phenomena? We need to maybe not so focus so much on evidence and proving something, but making things plausible. That the likelihood of things happening is great, and that maybe requires that we spend more time on design principles for learning environments that invite these types of qualities that are so important for a more sustainable, more equitable, and healthier world. So I think it is really critical that we think about research as well in this way, that we don't fall in the trap of research as mining. I sometimes refer to it, where we kind of mine adult learners for using these indicators and reducing people's lives to measurable variables and indicators that we somehow can quantify, to research as learning or co-learning, where we move away from this accountability towards a more reflexivity, where we learn together, and we also learn, we together decide what are signs of compassion, solidarity, what does make somebody feel more included, how can that be expressed, what might be the role of theater, drama, the arts in that, so that we also look for alternative ways of gauging. I think that is very important that we shift our attention towards that. And maybe even research as activism, where we show solidarity to those who are being marginalized, oppressed, or cannot breathe healthy air, or who are victim of this normalized unsustainability. So a shift from research as mining to research as learning and research as activism, I think, is important, and we need to think about what does that mean for measuring success, quote unquote. So with that, I hope I have said enough to kind of provoke people or invite people to comment on this, and maybe rethink the way we talk about measuring success in what I would call the Anthropocene. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Arjen. I'm sure we're probably going to have loads of people coming in a moment, but I loved what you said about slowing down. I think it's really important after the pandemic and everything that's going on in the world. We're all just trying to mind ourselves. And I think the importance of care and love needs to be a priority. And the subjectification, talking about that learning for being, it really is the essence of what we hope adult learning is, that it's a social justice movement, and it's about care and love for people and bringing people together. So the piece on, having being grounded in your community and your locality is so important in terms of that ethic of care and resistance as well. You've said a lot there. Obviously, I won't do it justice by trying to give a recap, but it was significant. Thank you. Does anybody have their hand up in the chat there, want to come in with the question? Message.
I would like to ask a question, Derval.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jane.
Just to say thank you, Arjen. I was scribbling furiously there, and I'll check out your blog, because I've been struggling myself as an educator in higher education and a researcher as well, around, pragmatically trying to think, how do we sell our message? How do we find a way to translate the reality of what we do in adult learning and community education to the powers that be, to help them move away from upskilling and employment and economic drivers, whilst, witnessing the destruction of our planet and of us within it. And I was trying to be pragmatic about it, and I was kind of lost in trying to sell it in the language they understand. And I'm just so grateful to hear the language that you're using, because it puts words on that confusion in my head. And I really appreciate the pedagogy of resistance, of solidarity instead of socializing. And I certainly will be moving much more towards changing minds and disrupting thoughts that have existed for a long time and has only brought us down this particular avenue, and really living up to my own values and ethos and the values of all of us here and pushing that back. So thank you.
Yeah, maybe just quickly to respond, Jane. I think, yeah, indeed, we need to find a different language. Like selling something to a group is not what we. It's more about an invitation. It is also connecting with where people are, of course, and there are lots of social niches, social movements that where people have energy and want to become in a more self-determined way off the grid of globalization, want to develop alternative pathways that are gaining, I think, strength and that are maybe coagulate or can be synthesized into a broader movement. Of course, there are also other types of movements that go in a completely different direction. But I do see there's more also among young people. People are worried about the future. They're looking for more hopeful futures. They want to imagine other futures where people aren't polarized, where people aren't violent towards each other and to the earth. Um, and there's a real yearning for meaning and hope, and people are resisting some of these globalizing tendencies, and this consumerist way of living is becoming problematic. People don't find joy in that as much anymore. So, and our schools and universities have a big role in cultivating, I think, other types of values that are more rooted in place, in community, and also more sensitive to the non-human world, and more peaceful with our fellow animals in a way. So, and that is another movement that I think is encouraging more people resisting eating meat and more people joining more vegan or vegetarian movements. It's all signs, I think, of looking for an alternative pathway.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. There's a lot of positivity there. There's a lot of people moving towards that place. And I think our role maybe certainly in the university around the research and teaching is to amplify that and work in partnership and go out and use our voices in that way to support others. So thank you again.
Thank you so much for coming in there, Jane. That was really interesting. And Arjen, I feel like you have managed to uphold my promise of everybody's brains feeling nourished this morning. So thank you for that. I think we're all very inspired. And I know that you have a very busy schedule, so I really appreciate you taking the time to be part of this launch this morning as well. You're very good. We hope you'll keep in touch and maybe submit an article for the 2023 edition, which is now open.
Pleasure. Thank you again, and have a great continuation of the discussion. And it's a very powerful journal, I think, with a great editorial board. I was very impressed when you were naming all these people.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Right.
Yeah, they're fantastic.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you, Arjen. You're very good. Bye. I'm going to now pass over to our editor, Rosemary Moreland, and Rosemary's going to give us an overview of the exciting discussion groups to come. Thanks, Rosemary.
Okay, thank you, Darvella, and good morning, everyone. Apologies for my little bit of late start here, and I'm really delighted to be joining this launch today. So we've now come to the part of our morning where we're going to introduce the workshops that will be taking place after the comfort break. And I know that you've already indicated the workshop that you would most like to attend, and hopefully the AONTAS staff have worked their magic and you'll be able to get to the workshop that you are interested in. But we thought it'd be a really good idea. We have so many of our authors here present with us this morning that we thought it would be great if they could give a little bit of an overview of their articles, and that will encourage you hopefully to actually go into the journal and read it from cover to cover and get all of the excellent learning that there is across all of the articles. And also our authors will be participating in the different workshops as well. So if you're in the workshop with a particular author, you'll get to, I suppose, get more in depth in around the particular article then that they have published. So the first piece I want to look at is actually our guest forward, which is a reflective piece, which was on the life and work of one of our former board members who sadly passed away last year. And we have actually dedicated this edition of the journal to her in the memory of the contribution that she made to adult learning. So, and also obviously to the board here. So I'm now going to invite Nuala Glanton, Liz McSkeen, and Celia Rafferty to tell us more about Liz's work in adult learning for social transformation. Thank you.
Thanks, Rosemary. Liz, would you like to start saying a little bit about what we've written? You're on mute, Liz.
There I am. You can hear me. Is that okay now? Yeah. Yes, and I'd just like to begin by saying what a privilege it was to be invited to make some small contribution to this, and to put on record the great respect and the love that we had for Liz. I knew Liz both personally and professionally for more than 30 years. I got to know her, first of all, through a group of friends who were at university together. And then I got to know her better as a colleague when we both worked in the curriculum development unit. And, you know, one of the things that became clear to me then, and as I got to know her over the years, was that the huge passion that Liz had for life and for her work. And the two passions that I think that really are most relevant for us was her passion for social justice. And anybody who knew her, I think, will testify to that. And also, along with that, her passion for education. And putting those two together, I think, made it possible for her to be an enormously influential person in the development of so many projects. And there are many initiatives, I think, that people are engaged in, and ideas that come up that they may not even realise that Liz was behind them. I mean, I'll leave it to others to be specific about that. But I knew her when she worked in the CDU, when she was in Youth Reach, and then when she was in the VEC and ETB. And I think one of the things, because I really, and the others, Noel and Celia worked actually closely with her, so I'll leave it to them to talk about the specifics of the actual jobs that she did. But in terms of her qualities, I think it was, she was enormously strategic. She had a great brain for, you know, spotting a need and also figuring out how that could be worked out, which is a hugely useful thing in a manager. She was also very determined and had a lot of personal charm, which meant that she was really able to get things done. And, you know, in fact, I find it hard to believe that she's not there anymore, because, you know, I might not see her for a long time, and then there'd be a phone call out of the blue, and it would be Liz with an idea, and it would usually be something that looked quite small, but that had an enormous amount of impact. So she was enormously talented. She had a great passion that brought everybody along with her, and also made learning and working on social justice fun. And I think she will be hugely missed, and I miss her. And I'm sure that I'm not the only one. So I'll leave it to Celia and Nuala to go into more specifics. So thank you very much, Nuala and Celia and AONTAS, for giving me this opportunity and for letting me contribute to this tribute to Liz.
Thanks, Liz. Celia, do you want to say something?
Thanks, Nuala, for giving me and Liz the opportunity to say a few words about our dear friend and colleague Liz O'Sullivan. I think it's a great testament that AONTAS have dedicated this journal to her career and her memory and her contribution to adult education. And that when we speak of adult education, what we mean is the community side of education, the non-formal sector, the part-time sector, the beginning of that first step back into education. Liz was part of the City of Dublin, the VEC, and then the ETB. And Liz started her career in the prison service. And I thought it was interesting when Arjen was talking and he mentioned the connection between education and the development of the person within the community. And he mentioned the arts and theatre. And I think it's very fitting to remark that when Liz started in her career in the prisons, that she was the one who was very involved in bringing theatre into the prison service, into education, and indeed played the role of Minnie in the Sean O'Casey play. And her colleagues in the prison service and will always remember her for that. So Liz lived the book of community education. Liz lived transformative education. She lived it in her everyday work, and all of the things that we talk about in the philosophy of the transformative nature of education. That was Liz's life, work and passion, and she delivered it in the prison service. she delivered it into the Youth Reach service. When she joined Youth Reach, she became one of the very first coordinators of Youth Reach across the city of Dublin. And she brought in new and transformative ways of thinking, because both in the prisons and in Youth Reach, because she was there at the beginning and at the forefront, they were all of the days when there was no such thing. This was a new initiative. And so there was no book, there was no curriculum, there's no way of doing it. But so she was part of that notion of the students defining their own curriculum, defining what it is they would learn, how they would learn, and had a participative nature of education. All of those things that we talk about in the philosophy of education, they are all the things that Liz delivered every day in her work in the prisons and in Youth Reach. And then she became, a few years later, she became one of the adult education officers of the City of Dublin DEC and then the ETB. Again, she brought all of that philosophy and thinking into adult education. And when I talk about adult education, what we mean is the informal sector, the adult literacy, community education, our part-time ESOL programs, working with the students who are most disadvantaged and most disadvantaged and distant from the workforce, education, and all of the other things that we talk about when we talk about the transformative nature of education. Liz was that. She personified that, and her memory is seen in all of the publications that we have always worked with. Her memory will be there forever, because she defined what it is that we talk about when we're talking about adult education. She was a wonderful woman, she was a friend, she was a colleague, and her mark has been left right throughout not only the City of Dublin, but throughout the national agenda of adult education, particularly in regard to her desire and striving to have education counted as something that has a social significance. It's not just the narrow definition of getting a job and counting results and counting outcomes. The outcome is, I filled in a ticket today with my name on it. The outcome is I went to the theatre. The outcome is I participated. I helped my children with their homework. These are the outcomes that she knew, believed in, and delivered on. And her contribution is greatly to be recognised. And thank you to AONTAS for having recognised Liz in this piece of work. And thanks for the opportunity to say a few words. Thanks.
Thanks, Celia and Liz. It's a very, very fitting tribute. And you're right, Liz embodied the values of adult education, and it's very fitting. It ties in with the theme of measuring success. I know she as Celia mentioned there, she wanted education to count, but not count in the metrics that we're faced with at the moment. Really count. And Noel, like the passion and the transformation in Noel's life, like how do you measure that success? You don't measure it in metrics, and that was something Liz fought against as part of her work. So thanks very much, Liz and Celia. We'll hand back to you, Rosemary.
Okay, thank you, Nuala, for that. So staying with the theme of adult learning for transformation, then we are going to be inviting Maeve Dempsey, who was one of the authors of the article Communities of Practice and Communities in Practice, a case study of the co-creation of an adult education family support network program. So I'll just invite Maeve then to say a few words about their article.
Hi, can you all hear me okay? Yeah, okay, thank you so much, and thank you for that introduction as well. So yeah, I had the privilege of being the facilitator, or as we know it in higher education, the lecturer in this situation. So it was developed, I suppose the main focus was the creation or the co-creation of an adult education program between higher education. So it was the then Institute of Technology Carlow with TUSLA, specifically pertaining to the Prevention, Partnership and Family Support stream under TUSLA. So Within that function, there is a group of practitioners who come together in a thing called child or a CFSN, so Child Family Support Networks. And the CFSNs, the role of a CFSN basically is very much around that shared learning, the shared experience, and in essence, they are communities of practice. And I think part of the role of this was identifying them as communities of practice before they recognise that themselves. But definitely in practice, that's how they would have presented. So in that context, the Child and Family Support Networks, they support services engaged in family support and making sure that it's easily accessible, integrated, and it's very much about the front line in their own communities. So these are very much the practitioners who are working within their communities, cognizant of the experiences of families and young people, the harms, the ills, but also the challenges and barriers that they're experiencing on a daily basis. So in that context, we adopted, there were 3 stages within our article, and I suppose the primary focus is, as I said, on that co-creation space, and how do you do that and really make sure that it's inclusive and very much a space where the learners can feel comfortable, can engage in that space where they can share their own experiences, and without them at the core or at the heart of it, the whole purpose would have been effectively lost. So the module was developed to strengthen and link academic theory. But as I said, a key component was the collective gathering of the CFSN members. I'll call CFSN, Child Family Support Network, is a mouthful, so I limit it for the rest of it. And obviously our objective was, providing these opportunities to create organic spaces for them to get to know each other in an alternative context. And the whole idea was that we removed these barriers such as like sector representation, the whole like who funds you, time restraints and so on. And we promote instead the development of these professional relationships in order to effectively reduce silos. But at the core was obviously the experience that the families and young people in our communities are going to have. So the whole idea was develop their theoretical knowledge, increase capacity to deliver like quality evidence-based practice, but that space to create the new and also enhance existing working relationships with their partners within the community. Obviously from that, we also reduced duplication of service delivery and identified the blocks to engagement in interagency work. How it looked in practice was an amazing space where these practitioners and family support workers, psychotherapists, we had educational welfare officers, youth workers, residential care workers, people who are very much like at the coalface of that space. And they came together we had a lovely classroom, it was fantastic, but they came together and there was such a willingness and an engagement to share, to learn, to name it, as opposed to like all barriers in terms of how we should say it or whatever. They were all removed and people were just so real and I suppose energized to really achieve the most that they could for their communities and with their communities. It was just prior, it kind of was happening just at the cusp of COVID. So we still were able to have classroom delivery for some of it. And obviously that changed then further on, where we were able to move it online and still very much achieve the same thing. So in terms of the co-creation part for the certificate in prevention, partnership and family support, one of the main focuses for us then was the student learning experience, and that wasn't lost in favor of, for example, this need for like academic rigor, but that instead we were very much recognizing that these were experts in their communities and of their communities. They were the ones who had the knowledge, and my role was very much around supporting them to make those links to theory and to build their confidence in recognizing and underpinning it from the space of, you know, having that theory or that evidence base, and recognizing you've been doing this all along. This is how you package it, or this is what the name is. And I think that I'm just conscious of time. I've probably already gone over 5 minutes. Like, I think one of the most significant parts definitely for me as the facilitator was the feedback from the participants and from the learners, and to actually hear, there was one particular account where they said, I've never been involved in a learning environment as powerful as this. And obviously as a facilitator, you know, you go in with the hope. And I love that, you know, we've talked about you know, the languages we use, and it's so important to meet the people where they're at, like meet your learners where they're at, that you hear them, that it's not like, oh, we're teaching to curriculum, but that it's about them. And, you know, we've used the word love, and that love and solidarity, and that, I suppose, egalitarian practices within our education, it's so important. So it didn't matter if you've been to higher education before, if you hadn't, they were the experts, they had the experience, and they facilitated the transformative piece within that room. And I suppose for me as an educator, to be able to see that what I had wished for them in terms of for it to be powerful, for it to be transformative, and for that to be the feedback, is certainly powerful for me too. So that was one of the, I suppose, to get that kind of feedback and have them engaged was excellent. It was a twofold. We talked about transformative learning and communities of practice, obviously. So the transformative learning piece was very much twofold, in that obviously through exposure to content and the theories, and, you know, being able to discuss them in such an organic way and have that discourse permeate through it all. The transformation was, in essence, that the learners experienced that transformation and had first-hand experience of that in order to carry to the families that they're working with in the communities, in terms of they have experience of that transformative piece, and they can share it and have that effective, I suppose, empathy and awareness of those processes when engaging with the families, hopefully in a more at their level and more inclusive way. So I suppose it also started, just to note, and then I'll stop, just to note, it also, I suppose, it created a partnership between IT Carlow, now Setu, and TUSLA, where we've gone on to work with more community groups, supporting them around, you know, establishing certification of the work that they're already doing. So it was not just in this, not just for PPFS, but we certainly created or embarked upon a space of continued co-creation between TUSLA and higher education. So that's me. Thank you very much for listening, everyone.
Thank you very much, Maeve, for that very impassioned talk about what you've covered in your article, and it sounds really fascinating. We're now going to move on to the next focus of the next workshop, which is on measuring success, and we have two authors of two different articles which are going to be covered in this particular theme. And our first author then is Aisling Brennan, who is going to be discussing the article that she wrote with Maeve O'Grady on psychological capital, the missing link.
Good morning, everyone. And thank you to Derval and Rosemary and colleagues for the opportunity to talk about our paper today. So in our paper, Psychological Capital, the Missing Link, my colleague Maeve O'Grady and I explore the construct of psychological capital, which is also known as PsyCap. And we consider that PsyCap has great potential as a mechanism to widen the existing measures of success in community, adult and further education. So at present, we all know we're measured on PLSS by measures of numbers, certification and progression to further education, and also progression to employment. And while there's no doubt that these are valuable measures and they create wonderful outcomes for our learners from a socioeconomic perspective, we feel that, like many others here that are talking today, that these are just simply too narrow and that they fail to capture our learners' development of their personal skills and their psychological resources. I think we all recognise the wide breadth of outcomes that as practitioners we know that our learners are achieving through their participation in our programmes. And also when learners are asked to report on the benefits that they get from the programmes, it's also these soft skills or these personal skills and psychological resources that they refer to and name. So I think as practitioners, we can all identify with those learners who maybe when they start on our courses on the outset, that they present as maybe fearful and held back, and maybe that might display itself maybe in, you know, that they fail to make eye contact with us from the beginning, and they're reluctant maybe to engage. And I think after a period of time as practitioners, we can see as these learners progress on our programs that they actually grow in their confidence and self-belief in front of us. And I know I was talking to some educators recently, and we were all commenting on the fact that it's almost like people are walking taller as a result of engaging in programs. And yet this is something that is not captured in our reporting mechanisms. We can see these changes in their beliefs, in their attitudes, and in their behaviours. And I think as practitioners, we all recognise the value of this shift. And I know earlier when Noel was talking about his experience, and we could see that coming through very strongly. So I think that we are already using our learning processes and our classroom and our curriculum to support our learners to become more confident and optimistic. But the difficulty and challenge that we're all grappling with, I suppose, is that we don't have a framework for naming it and measuring these successes that go beyond performance and progression. And Maeve and I in our article feel that PsyCap has potential to offer us this. And PsyCap is made up of 4 psychological resources which mutually reinforce one another. It's also known as HERO. So you have hope, efficacy, which we also describe as confidence, resilience, and optimism. And psychological capital has been used, it originated in positive psychology, and more recently it has been used in positive organizational behavior to look at capturing outcomes in organizational settings, but for individual staff members as well as the organization themselves. And recently studies have been done internationally at 3rd level, so in America, Spain, and Portugal, and also in the Philippines in high school settings. And these studies show that psychological capital is positively associated with the outcomes that we want to achieve, such as academic achievement, academic performance rather, employability, career success, but more than that, flourishing, positive effect, and happiness. And these associations tell us that psychological capital has the potential to enhance our existing measures of performance and progression. But not only this, it also, we think, has the potential to expand these measures. And the good news is that psychological capital is actually measurable. There are reliable and robust measures there to capture psychological capital that have been used in a variety of settings. It's also malleable in that it can be developed, and we believe that adult education practitioners are in a great place to offer a proactive way of developing psychological capital for learners as they engage on our programs. We're quite excited about the concept, and in our paper we outline many ways in which psychological capital can be promoted at 3 levels of our practitioners in the classroom, our funders, and our providers. So thanks very much for the opportunity to chat about it today, and I really look forward to talking about it more in our discussions groups later.
That's great, Aisling. Thank you very much for that. And yes, I think it's excellent to hear of different ways in which we can actually measure success, and particularly having that more holistic view is really worth much more exploration. So our next article now is Measuring Success in Adult Education, Recognizing Diverse Outcomes from a Diverse Sector. And we have author Sarah Cross here to present an overview of her article. Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks, Rosemary. Good morning, everybody. And it's very interesting to follow on from Aisling and having read her article. Really interesting to see the work that herself and Maeve have done around creating these frameworks for measurement. So my article sits very well within that framework as well, because I looked at capturing the experiences of a small group of women who were participating on a Back to Education initiative course. And the reason why these particular women were of interest to me while I was working with them as a facilitator was because they wouldn't be defined as being educationally disadvantaged. And from an objective point of view, they would have all achieved high levels of success within education already. So I was very, very interested to see, when we look at pathways and frameworks of qualifications, when we look at the kind of narrow view of progression, these women had taken a step backwards, if you were to look at it, in those contexts, and they were enrolling on a course and entering an adult learning environment at a lower level on the national framework of qualifications than they had previously experienced. So when the journal topic of success came about, I really began to think about these particular women and to see it as an opportunity to explore what they viewed as success and why they would return to a setting that on paper might look like it was a lower level of educational achievement. So the most important part of my article really is that it was a qualitative piece to consider the experiences of these learners. And it also sought to add to the diversity of learner stories within adult and community education, because often this would be an under-researched area, these women having already achieved high levels of education and returning. So I was interested to see what prompted their return. I was interested to shine a light on their interpretations of success, but also, similar to what has been mentioned earlier on, looking at how this could be measured or how it should be measured. And I have used the term soft skills within my article, but I use it in order to have a terminology that people understand. I welcomed the piece in Aisling and Maeve's article where they kind of interrogate the use of soft skills. So I do believe that if we continue to have this dichotomy between what's a hard skill and what's a soft skill, we really are missing a lot of the real benefits that as practitioners and facilitators we see happening every day within this sector. So I sought to bring a learner voice into my article because I believe that it allowed us to add some nuance, to add some descriptive depth to our definitions of what were measurable outcomes and also the idea of progress. And in doing that, my article used some open-ended activities. So the learners took part in life history work where they were drawing their own life stories and their educational stories. We also then came together as a group and we discussed their experiences, and I would have used codes and prompts which helped to facilitate their discussion. So it was very, very much led by the learner, and I really wanted to keep it as open and broad as I could to see what they would bring to this discussion of success. So rather than me prompting that, it was really to try and draw out their ideas of success. And in terms of the journal and how everything sits together, there's so much overlap, and it's what's lovely about it. There's so much of a thread of different key ideas going through each of the articles. And one thing I think that is very interesting in my article is just reading these women's descriptions of what success means for them, and they're looking back on their own educational success throughout their life and also within this more recent educational program they were engaged in. My title also mentions diversity. So another key area is this recognition of the value of diverse learning groups. So the women focused a lot on the success and the outcomes that they had because their group was so diverse, and they speak about what that brought for them and helped them to step outside of their more narrow experiences, is how they would have described it, that being part of a diverse group really meant that their learning outcomes extended beyond the curriculum and extended beyond the learner-teacher relationship, because really it was the group themselves that brought these very powerful learning experiences for the women. In terms of returning to learning, the women would have given reasons which don't fall into the areas that we measure. So they talk about meeting people, keeping busy, stimulating their brains, reevaluating their purpose in life. A lot of the women had finished work, but were not yet in a period of retirement. So they were wondering where they were positioned now in society, and this adult education classroom gave them an opportunity to reflect on that. And some of the words they used included terms like life-saving and being an anchor, in particular when COVID-19 meant that the rest of their lives became less busy. So I think if we're looking at outcomes that are described as life-saving or anchoring, this is evidently incredibly important to the learner, but they're not the type of benefits that are officially measured. And, I really do believe and agree with what previous speakers have said, that there is a need for more inclusive and diverse measurement categories, similar to the framework that is outlined in Aisling and Maeve's article. In terms of just some of my concluding recommendations, having done this piece of research, the women were taking part in a Back to Education initiative course, and I would believe that places on courses such as this should be reserved for those who are educationally disadvantaged. But I do believe that recognition should also be given to the value of these diverse learning groups and the successful outcomes that membership of a diverse learning group can bring, and that diversity within educational settings should be enabled where possible through funding and recruitment mechanisms. And yes, prioritizing education disadvantaged, but also recognizing that if people are enrolling or signing up to a course, there's a need there's something that they feel that they want to gain from their experience. Again, more accurate measurement of outcomes that include a broader understanding of success should be formalized. There's been talk already about how it's very possible, and any attempts to do this previously have probably just been precluded by our neoliberal systems of what's important to measure. I don't see any reason why we can't begin to measure these so-called softer skills, and I think that as a sector we really should move to try and do that as quickly as we can. And I do believe that this division of soft and hard skills is harmful, and it precludes us from seeing and recording all of the successes in adult and community education. And I suppose my final piece about my article would just be to continue to focus on radical adult education practices, practices that embody critical reflection on individually held attitudes, reflection on our personal beliefs, on wider social norms. And if these are a core of the adult learning experience, then we really do open up the possibility for a range of different success stories, where success means many different things to many different people. Thank you.
Okay, Sarah, thank you very much for that. So we're going to move on now to looking at the third topic, which is on inclusion and human rights. And again, we have two pieces of work, two articles that we're going to be using to explore this topic further. So our first author then is Thomas Murray, and I'm going to invite Thomas to talk to us about what his article is all about. Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you, Rosemary, and thank you to Derval, all the team at AONTAS and the editors of the Adult Learner Journal. My name is indeed Thomas Murray. I am the Higher Education Lead at An Chosán, and I'm also the author of Contesting Economic and Social Rights in Ireland, 1848 to 2016. So my paper combines these two interests in economic and social rights and in adult community education. It's entitled Community Education for Human Rights and Social Inclusion, and it looks at a single case study Oncoson's Right to Work Education project. So in the paper, I argued that successful human rights education requires adult community education practice. It involves a combination of holistic wraparound supports and the creation of transformative participatory learning environments. Okay, so I don't think that will come as a surprise finding maybe to many of the people here, but I think it's really important to document our work, to reflect on it, and then to share it with others, so we can learn for the future. To give a little bit of background, Oncason is the Irish for the Path. We're a community organisation based in Jobstown and Tala. We offer people of all ages diverse programmes from early years education and care, parenting, community, further and higher education, all under one roof. And in recent years, we've moved online, enabling us to take our ethos beyond Jobstown to communities across the country. Our student body consists of those furthest behind, as the UN Sustainable Development Goals might put it, and predominantly students experiencing socioeconomic disadvantage. Many of them are lone parents, and increasingly numbers of students who are international protection applicants, refugees and asylum seekers, many of whom are living in direct provision. So it was through our work with movement of asylum seekers in Ireland, with refugees and asylum seekers in different communities around Ireland, we listened carefully and we heard that in the context of new legislation emerging in 2018, 2019, new legislation governing international protection applicants' right to work, we learned that there were specific needs around how the legislation would work in practice. International protection applicants expressed concerns around navigating the Irish workplace, as well as what their human rights would be in the workplace. We were successful with an application to the Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission. I'd like to acknowledge their support. And through that, we were able to partner with 40 international protection applicants who took part in the project, and they're in direct provision centres around the country. From Galway, Kerry, Wexford, Waterford, as well as many around Dublin. The programme itself sought to meet those needs that we identified around participants' questions, around human rights and social inclusion, access to the job market, knowing what your rights are in the workplace, as well as actually how to get a job, how to get employment or self-employment. The programme was delivered face-to-face over 9 days of workshops, and using adult community education methods, practitioners facilitated really highly participatory learning spaces where international protection applicants could meet with one another and meet with other stakeholders in different support groups, so that they could explore the legislation governing the right to work. They could explore what works in practice, and they could discuss their own experiences of navigating direct provision and navigating the transition into the labour market and into active citizenship and into wider society. Blended learning options, capacity to join online, were offered to those who couldn't attend in person. So what the article does is it draws on participant voices, and as well as some of the practitioners who are involved in the delivery of the programme, to outline its short-term impact. Concentrating in particular on education for human rights, for economic and social rights, I analyse what worked and why. So in the short term, participants reported I think, like people were saying, an increase in hard skills, in terms of digital skills, in terms of increased knowledge and understanding of how the job market worked, enhanced understanding of human rights. It also built up a lot of soft skills in terms of collaboration, working with others, and of course, as everyone who works in adult ed knows, confidence and self-belief. what the learner feedback underlined was it was that adult community education methods work, that it was the project's participatory educative process that most helped, most facilitated their developing confidence. And it was the single most important and most commented part of the feedback. It was interesting listening to Arjen earlier when he spoke about measures for solidarity, because that's exactly what emerged from the project. Beyond the participants themselves, they established new relationships with people in the Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission, were able to take up questions and cases around the availability to people in direct provision of driving license, disability accommodations. They were also able to meet with other learners in Ancusson. And interestingly, some of our learners in Southend Family Resource Centre in Wexford went on to set up a refugee and migrant solidarity project with some of the participants on our project as well. So there are all kinds of amazing outcomes, I think, that can happen when adult community educators and adult community education organisers are given the resources to go and pursue those projects. So when it comes specifically to the recommendations around teaching and educating for human rights, I just draw on the Australian community development practitioner, Jim Ilf, who really talks about the necessity for when we teach human rights, that it needs an active dialogic relationship between the teacher and the learner, that rights need to be understood in the context of people's lived experience, especially their personal experience of human rights abuse or violation. And I think this echoes, in a sense, Noel's point at the start of this morning, that it's not the old adage, do as I say, not as I do, is very bad practice in any consequence, in any context, but particularly so when dealing with human rights, that people don't need to be told what the legislation is so much as that they form a very clear impression of how they're treated in the process, and the process of welcoming people in, listening to them with respect, involving them in participation and decision-making around the project is absolutely essential. Drawing on their experience, acknowledging and validating that, all within an ethos of care and solidarity, and an ethos of celebration for who they are and what they've achieved through the project. That's absolutely essential. So I don't want to give too much more away, because obviously I want people to go on and read the piece. So just for now, I just want to say thank you very much. And I look forward to discussing the work and indeed the work from everyone else later in the breakout groups. Thanks.
Okay,
Rosemary.
thank you, Thomas. That is absolutely excellent. So we're just going to move on then to Rim Day and Rola Nab, who are going to be looking at adult literacy.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for giving me the chance to talk about my paper today. Actually, being a teacher of English for 14 years, I realized that learning a second language could be challenging for students, and especially if these students are low literate, they don't have literacy skills. So many migrants and asylum seekers coming here to England who are low literate, especially women, and they join ESOL classes and trying to be literate for the first time, but in a second language or sometimes in a third language, which is the English language. So this group of people, and I said especially women, are disadvantaged in the ESOL classes. And I feel like basically like because of lack of funding and inconsistency in funding in ESOL, these people are being like excluded in this course. So we believe that this group of people require more attention. So this, in my article, I refer to them as LESLA learners, or again as low literate learners. And this group of people are under-researched. So basically, as I mentioned earlier, we've got a lack of resources in ESOL, lack of cohesion, consistency in supporting and funding ESOL courses. So I believe that such groups are, because they are low literate, obviously they start in a pre-A1 level according to the European framework. Basically all accredited courses from A1 to C1, many there are accredited assessment for these groups, but for the pre-A1 level, there's no standardized assessment. So an in-house assessment is being developed in each college or by each teacher. And due to this, most of the teachers who are being allocated to this group of or to pre-A1 ESOL courses, they are less experienced, to be honest, generally speaking, and so they are not trained enough to design test materials. So in this study, what I've done is I've analyzed the materials used in reading assessment in the pre-A1 level ESOL course. And based on this analysis, we've realized that the assessment materials are not suitable for low literate learners. So basically the findings show that the materials are not suitable for them, because even though these learners are proficient enough to extract meaning from a text, they are unable to show this in the assessment, because the reading assessment is a challenge itself, as it is believed the tasks are hindering learners from revealing their knowledge due to the materials focused on measuring what learners cannot do, rather than measuring and capturing the small steps that they have achieved during their course. When compared to learners who are literate. So in this study, basically my recommendation is to separate literate learners from low literate ones in the pre-A1 level, especially in the process of assessment. In addition, a review should be undertaken of the materials used to assess low literate learners, because what is being used may be suitable for the beginner level, but only for those with a literate background. So basically, based on previous studies, we can see that low literate learners cannot transfer what they learn into examination setting, basically because of the complexity of the tasks. So the assessment cannot show the real progress that low literate learners make, especially with the lack of descriptor or criteria that show the small steps achieved by low literate learners in the initial assessment, tracking progress, and of course the level promotion assessment. So basically there is a study, or let's say a project funded by the Council of Europe to create a descriptor below A level, and the project is called the Literacy and Second Language Learning for the Linguistic Integration of Adult Migrants. And this one is basically outlines the can-do statements that can be used as learning goals at the pre-A1 level. It also promotes the use of individual profiles for assessment at all levels for low literate learners. So basically this study is a multifunctional analysis to the materials used in the reading assessment. Basically it is a qualitative study that explores the reading assessment materials in the pre-A1 level ESOL classes in the UK, or especially in England, and the suitability of them to low literate learners. So the findings, as I mentioned again, I mentioned that the low literate learners struggle when they, in their experience in the reading assessment, and they need to be separated from the low literate learners. These assessment materials should be adapted to ensure fair assessment to these students. And of course, a descriptor or criteria should be developed to capture the small steps achieved by this population. So just in brief, of course, I'd like everyone to read the article for more details, but that's the brief, or that's an outline of my study, me and Rula's studies about ESOL assessment framework. Thank you very much for listening.
Okay, sorry. So thank you, Rim, for that. And I'm just going to now move on to the next workshop, which is on the learner voice and identity. Unfortunately, of the two articles, we unfortunately don't have any of the authors here with us today. So I'm going to be introducing the articles. So the first one is by Niamh O'Reilly, who is our former CEO of AONTAS and was also the chair of the Adult Learner Journal. And her article is on reflections of the previous chair And basically, she really, in her article, I suppose, reflects over her 17 years of working in AONTAS and 6 years as the CEO. And the key themes really that she addresses in her article is really around a holistic understanding of learning, what her experience is of working with adult learners, and particularly in an advocacy role. She also really argues for the need to have that recognition of the wider power of learning for both social and personal transformation. But she goes on to also look then at maybe what are some of the tensions in advocacy work with adult learners, and this tension really, I suppose, between the holistic view and the pragmatic view of adult learning. And really she talks then about, how adult learning really is a powerful route out of poverty. She then goes on to introduce her third level learner support framework, which looks very interesting, and which she has developed from the advocacy work for learners, especially over COVID. And basically, she concludes her argument really by advocating for supporting and putting resources into community education. So the next article then that I want to introduce is by a number of authors. So it includes Susan Flynn, Joseph Collins, Lindsay Malone, and they're from the Faculty of Lifelong Learning in the Southeast Technological University at the Carlow campus. And their article is entitled Part-Time Learners' Perceptions of Success During ERT. And these authors reflect on their findings from a qualitative study that they carried out to examine the impacts of emergency remote teaching, which had taken place during COVID, to examine what this tells us about learner identity. Their study highlights what learners viewed as barriers to success. And the key findings from their research included things like a lack of social interaction, a lack of collaborative working, lack of role models when students couldn't actually be on campus, that they couldn't actually see other students then and have those role models which they felt was important to them becoming successful learners themselves. And actually that lack of being on campus and being able to associate with an educational institution, with an educational building, they also identified as being an area which actually as a barrier to their success. So overall, their conclusions were that they could see that there were some benefits to the online learning, which obviously had to take place during COVID, and particularly regarding the convenience for learners, which was something that those learners kind of reflected on. But overall, their final conclusions are really that face-to-face interaction really creates stronger learner identity, which they then argue is really important for success. So that concludes our fourth workshop, and I'm going to move on now to the fifth workshop, which Lillian Nwanzi will introduce to us on critical pedagogy and the reflective practitioner.
Hi, can you hear me? All right, perfect. Thank you. And thank you, everyone. I authored this article with Camilla Fitzsimons, who sadly can't be here today. She's engaged, but she sends her regards. So in this article, Camilla and I draw from critical race theory, critical pedagogy, and our own lived experiences to advance an argument that white supremacy and racism are the normal way the global West is structured. We try to show that racism goes beyond the interpersonal and is a more structural issue. We argue that racism is so pervasive that it permeates all sectors of the society, and in spite of the best intentions of adult educators, white supremacy finds its way and is reproduced in the adult education classroom. We argue using a critical pedagogic lens that creating liberatory, dialogic, and problem-posing educational spaces are a vital step for dealing with this issue of racism. And of course, we contrast such spaces with Eurocentric narrative banking spaces that Paulo Freire highlights as spaces that perpetuate the white supremacist status quo. We then go ahead to propose a few things that adult educators could do or refrain from doing in order to create these critical, engaged, anti-racist learning environments. Now, we do not claim to have a magic wand that can just take racism away with a wave, but we have suggestions drawn from theory, from practice, and from our own experiences. We suggest, for instance, relying on critical race theory, that educators should turn their gaze away from assumptions that racism is solely interpersonal, and instead view it as a social construct that permeates the very capillaries of society. We note the discomfort that comes from speaking about racism in the classroom, and leveraging on the writings of people like Stephen Brookfield, we suggest 3 ways by which white or even Black adult educators could bring up the issue of race and racism in their classrooms. We discuss in the essay scaffolding, modeling, and creating community. These 3 things are very well explained in the article. We write also about the need for adult educators to rotate away from the claim of colorblindness, and we explain how colorblindness actually perpetuates racism rather than deals with it. We write about the need and the importance of excavating personal experiences and reflecting on them both for the teacher as well as the student, and how this exercise of reflection could aid in creating anti-racist classrooms. In addition to the do's, we highlight some things that educators ought not to do. We write about not brandishing allyship in the face of minorities and gloating about being an ally. We write about organizations resisting the temptation to portray themselves as woke organizations by leaning on their proximity with their minority staff and students. We write also about resisting tokenistic representations of minorities. Throughout the essay, we punctuate our points with vignettes, stories, and reflections from our own lives. And in summary, really, our article just proposes some sort of anti-racist pedagogy as a contribution to creating anti-racist adult education spaces. And I dare say it will be an interesting read to anyone who is interested in social justice or in creating anti-racist spaces. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you for that, Lillian. So I think we're now going to move to our 10-minute comfort break. And if people can just try to stick to that. Or am I panting over to you, Derval? Sorry.
No, that's perfect. We're going to go to our comfort break. Thanks so much for that, Rosemary. And that was brilliant to hear from all the authors and contributors. We'll have our 10-minute comfort break. So we will come back at 22. I'm now confusing myself with time as I usually do. And then when we come back, please do come back on time, because we're going to jump straight into our discussion group. So it's really important and respectful to all the authors today that we're back on time to be able to jump in. So please go and get yourself a nice cup of tea or coffee, and we'll see you in 10 minutes. And thank you so much for staying with us. We really appreciate it. I think we probably have most people, so we'll keep on our track. Great. So thank you so much. Welcome back. Hope you're enjoying the day so far. It's been really interesting to hear from so many different people. And we will now go into our breakout rooms. So the breakout rooms, there is 5 different rooms, and you've already been coordinated into your rooms by our expert rooms by our expert Connor. So you will get a little pop-up message, and it'll tell you what room you're in. So please click accept when that pops up. And when you're in the room, you'll be greeted by some AONTAS staff and authors and contributors from the editorial board and the articles themselves. So you'll have loads of interesting people to have a chat to. And we'll have about 30 minutes to do that. I know that might seem like a long time, but you know yourself with these discussions, once you really get stuck in, the time flies by. So it's nice to have enough time for a real conversation. And then in that room, the AONTAS staff member that's there will take notes, and then they will come back and feedback 3 points in a very succinct manner. We will try our best after that, so that'll be great. So I think hopefully we have everybody now. So I'll ask Connor if he is ready to maybe pop that group. There we are, brilliant. I'm sure we'll see you back in half an hour. Thanks so much, guys. Hi everyone, welcome back. I think we still have people coming in. I can see the numbers rising on the screen. I'm just realizing you probably should have taken note of everybody's names in the room. Here we are. But I'm sure it'll be fine. Anyway, welcome back. I hope the discussions were great. I think we probably have everybody now. So what we'll do is just take around, I'm going to say 8 minutes to try and get some feedback. So we'll ask the people from each room. We had a note taker in each room to give 3 points to the room. And if anybody else in the meantime wants to pop anything in the chat box, please do let us know, because obviously it's a big task for the note taker to try and pull all of that in while it's happening in action, and then to share the points. So if there's anything else that you feel like you want to add as well, please do. So I'm now going to hand over to Kate. Kate, would you like to share the 3 points from your room?
Thanks, Derval. Well, we had a great discussion in my room and I learned loads. So we talked about the power of adult learning for social transformation. So I was lucky enough to be in a room with Celia Rafferty, with Maeve Dempsey, with Nuala Glanton, and with Maria Slowey, as well as Suzanne and Marta from the AONTAS team. I'll just touch on a couple of the main points that we discussed. A big topic of discussion was the power of learner or student voice, and as that being an important measure for success, and a method that we can use to measure success. So we talked about reflective practice for learners and how encouraging learners to, enabling learners to share their stories, to vocalize what they've achieved, that they are, one of the best advertisements for the work and for adult learning. We talked about the challenges due to the very specific targets and their measures of success that people are being asked to demonstrate in terms of progression to employment or progression to further education, but how learner or student stories can be used to kind of counteract this narrative. And we also talked about the idea of active citizenship as being a route to social transformation for people. So both in terms of getting parents involved in schools and the impact on children, but also then on parents and communities, and that kind of intergenerational effect. Also kind of the small steps that can be taken to improve people's experience of learning. So whether that's engagement with social and cultural events, like we talked about going to the Botanic Gardens or to live theatre, and the impact that can have on people's lives. And we talked about the importance of validation and representation in society. So when people see others like them, and how that impacts on a sense of belonging and a sense of the power of people's voices. So I think I covered a lot of it, but please, anyone from my group, feel free to jump in.
You covered loads there, Kate. Fair play to you. That was brilliant. I love the idea there of that representational piece and people seeing people like them. It's so important. That's fantastic. Thank you. I will now hand over to Caris, who is in group 2, I believe, and the theme was measuring success. Thanks, Caris.
Thanks, Derval. That's it exactly. Our group was discussing measuring success. We were joined by the authors Ashlyn Brennan and Sarah Koss, and facilitated by Stephen O'Brien. So big thank you to all of you. Again, a really interesting conversation with a lot of different viewpoints represented. So I'll concentrate on 3 key themes that came up. The first was about alternative frameworks for success. So other ways of measuring success than the current existing frameworks, which tend to focus on educational attainments and exams and so forth. So there was a discussion of other frameworks that have been used, for example, in youth work, a suggestion that youth work is less connected with education, so there may be useful examples for us there. There was also discussion of psychological capital, obviously, considering the article that we spoke about. And a very interesting conversation there about when we borrow frameworks from other disciplines, are we also borrowing the conceptual underpinnings of that framework? And the need to kind of critique and interrogate the frameworks that we may borrow to see, are they bringing something with them that we perhaps didn't mean to bring? So that's a very important step in the process of using other frameworks. We then moved on to the idea of why we need to measure success. In other words, why do we need to prove the value of our work? Why do we feel this need that we have to have a framework for measurement rather than to trust the process? Some very interesting responses to that, including the need that there's a need to help learners understand value of their learning beyond the kind of traditional measures of success, and also of the need for measurement of success in terms of advocacy, in terms of keeping courses going and keeping the higher ups, if you like, aware of the value of what's being done and the need to show that in some way. And then the third sort of theme that came through was the need for balance, to not risk emphasizing deficit and making learners feel that they have in some way failed if they now have another set of success measures to achieve. So that was kind of countered with the idea of the need for balance, that it's not the learner's responsibility to achieve these outcomes, it's the educator's responsibility to help set the conditions that will allow them to achieve whatever success it is they're aiming for. So that was the discussion, and again, do feel free to add any other points into the chat there, and thanks everyone for taking part.
Brilliant, thanks Karis. You covered a lot as well, really insightful and thoughtful conversation. I had this very visual image when you mentioned the frameworks of someone taking a frame and all these things coming behind it there. That sounds, yeah, it's really important to think about that, isn't it? Hadn't thought about that before. And I really like the idea of trusting the process and the balance there. I'm very excited now to hand over to Aisling. Aisling's group was group 3, and I believe the theme was inclusion and human rights. Thank you, Aisling.
Thanks, Derval. So thank you to everyone who participated in our group. So you had Rim Day, David Mallows, Thomas Murray, Dan O'Sullivan, and then some of the AONTAS staff as well, Amy and John Owen Ray as well. So thank you to everybody. So yeah, I will try and do this as succinctly as possible. Really interesting discussion. So we talked a lot about the kind of barriers that were associated with the kind of measurement metrics framework that has been that we've kind of been working off the last, I don't know, since the recession, potentially the last recession here. That's when it really, I think, started to explode. But yeah, so you know, the skills measurement is really not appropriate for measuring success in adult education, and that's really felt with low-level literacy learners in ESOL. So you know, there's like a pre kind of A1 level where people are they're coming in with different levels of English literacy, and they're often excluded from participating even in these assessments, merely because the assessment isn't actually structured in an accessible way. These learners are not able to have interpreters to explain even the meaning of some of the language in the assessment, and that's then resulting in people being excluded even participating in that. You know, and then, you know, other kind of barriers also, including just, you know, not being able to measure, not just the soft skills, but somebody's kind of progression through a program. So an example of a youth reach learner kind of coming in initially, you know, there's a lot of, you know, kind of things going on in the home life, and the learners coming in with a lot of anger issues and not really able to or willing to engage. And over a year, you know, that this kind of turns around on its head, and the person's really willing and engaged. And how then is that? How do you measure that? Then we talked a lot about kind of alternative frameworks. An example of Scottish kind of adult education policy was given, where, you know, you're really looking at bridging the gap between the classroom and the community. And again, how do you measure that kind of success? And you know, just the SciCap kind of alternative as well is it seems to be something that could be applied as a kind of alternative framework to measure. And just, yeah, that I suppose these issues also extend kind of past the past adult education environment, you know, that these kind of neoliberal metric kind of systems have been applied across social care sector, you know, examples of how it's applied in SNA as well. So yeah, a lot of kind of good kind of alternative suggestions from our participants as well. It's really interesting.
So much to take in there. Thank you, Aisling. A very considered conversation. And yeah, I think it's even a bit scary to think about now. Are we at risk of facing those barriers all over again as we potentially face an economic downturn? But hopefully we can learn from it and fight and stand strong in the sector. But I think that was really, really thoughtful. Thank you so much. Our group 4 was learner voice and identity, and our note taker was Laura. I'll hand over to you, Laura. Thank you.
Thanks, Derval. Thanks to everyone who contributed to our group discussion. Our group featured Jane O'Kelly, Derval Lawless and Noel Hanrahan. We also heard from Rachel Cheat and Edel Kenny. And we heard the perspectives of adult learners, community education practitioners, and the Adult Guidance Service. So one of the things we discussed was the individual impact of learner voice being implemented successfully in an adult learning environment, and how a practitioner's trust and centering of the learner themselves can really increase someone's sense of self-belief, agency, and their trust. And when learner voice works well, it's brilliant, and it has that kind of life-changing impact on the individual. But there's that question of how to reach people who are at risk of being sidelined, and how to get out into communities and extend that hand of outreach to people who could really benefit from participating in education. And resourcing came up as really crucial in this area. Lack of resourcing is a huge barrier for groups, and that includes staff, funding, workloads being such that they don't actually allow people the time to get out into communities and do that kind of outreach. And the point was made that time is a really crucial resource in addition to funding, that some community education groups just don't have. And then the third point was, how can we better demonstrate that social and interpersonal value of adult education? This is something that groups know, and we know from hearing from Noel earlier that experientially this is hugely important to learners, and we know that the benefits are there outside of qualifications and upskilling, but how can that be reflected maybe in reporting to funders? Yeah, so those were the main points in our group. Thanks, everyone.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Laura. And as Laura said there, the point on time, I think, really is central. That was a big theme in our conversation, and Laura's given an excellent overview, something that we need to be able to have to go out and talk to learners. I'm now delighted to introduce Eve. So Eve is going to talk about critical pedagogy and the reflective practitioner from Group 5. Thanks, Eve.
Thanks, Derval. So we were tasked with thinking about how we can support anti-racist learning, and as Hussein has pointed out in the discussion there at the side, it was a very challenging topic to deal with in 30 minutes, but we definitely had a really wide-ranging discussion. So it was chaired by Rosemary and Hussein, and we were in discussion with Lillian and some other colleagues as well. So first of all, we felt that we have to acknowledge that racism is systemic, and have to recognise this through our critical reflective practice before we can actually challenge it through a pedagogy of resistance. So very much resonating with Arjen's discussion as well. And it was mentioned that Freire's idea that we're not born racist but become racist was really crucial here. So if that's the case, then we can certainly stop being racist, and education forms a really important part of how we unlearn some of those practices, which are very much kind of stemming from colonialism and capitalism as well. So those are really framing the issues. Secondly, we can't treat all learners the same. A pedagogy of care that takes account of people's experiences and challenges instead of colour blindness is needed. And thirdly, we are seeing new manifestations of colonialism or neo-colonialism through media, and this needs to be challenged, but we need to be attentive to and learn how to address these new challenges in particular that we're seeing perpetuated online at the moment. So I hope that kind of just skirts around some of the issues we discussed, but yeah, absolutely fantastic discussion online today.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Eve. Loads in there as well. I love that concept of unlearning those practices. It's really important. Brilliant. Thank you. I am now going to pass over to Rosemary. I think we're doing a bit of chop changing, moving back and forth here, Rosemary, but I'll pass over to you.
No problem at all. Okay, thank you, Derval, and thank you for everyone who has participated in the day. I think it has been a very productive day, and hopefully that has given you a lot of food for thought, as it were, and hopefully also has really, I suppose, generated a lot of interest in people going online and being able to read through in more depth and more detail the articles that, you know, either in terms of the workshop you've participated in or in our initial overview of the articles. And we really hope that, you know, you can take some of those ideas forward within your own practice. So I just want to make some final closing remarks, really just to, you know, thank all of the participants for signing up to today. I hope it was a very worthwhile experience for you. I want to thank Dervla and obviously all the AONTAS staff that not only in the excellent running and smooth running of today's event, but I know that behind the scenes and in terms of the planning of this, that, you know, there's an awful lot of planning goes into an event like this for it to actually run as smoothly as it does. So thanks very much, especially to Juliana, and I know also then Charis, but, you know, for everyone in AONTAS who has worked with us to bring us to this day today. Thank you for that. I also want to thank the members of the editorial board, particularly, you know, those that have facilitated the workshops today and hopefully made it, you know, a very participative event for you. And thanks to the authors who came along and, you know, gave us a short review of their article and participated in the workshops, which really you know, made it a very lively discussion for all of us. So, and I'd just like to thank our outgoing CEO and chair of AONTAS, who, although she can't be present with us today, we would like to record our thanks to Niamh O'Reilly and wishing her well in the new appointment in Maynooth. So I'll pass on back to you, Dervla.
Thank you so much, Rosemary. Yeah, huge thanks to Niamh for all the work that she did as well. And we're really sad that she can't be here today, but we'll send her on the recording. Yeah, I just want to say thank you to everybody for coming today. We really appreciate you taking the time. We hope you enjoyed the session. Massive thanks to Juliana, to Caris, to Rosemary, and to the editorial board and all the AONTAS staff and to everybody who's been involved. And I think huge well done to all the writers. You know, it takes a lot of courage to put yourself forward and to share something personal. So well done for doing that, and be really proud of your success being published in the 2022 edition. And for the 2023 edition, please do get in touch, send in your article. And I will say what's great is that there's 2 writers' workshops. So if you're someone who is a little bit nervous about academic writing and you want to get involved, we are ensuring that there is a space for support. So the editorial board are really great. They're going to go out of their way to meet with you, to give you advice, to have writers' workshops and to help you through that process. So please come forward. We'll be delighted to see you. Have a lovely week. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you again soon. Bye.